All hail Anton, Anton is correct, Anton must not be wrong, Anton must remain ambiguous if in question, or if Anton is shown to be wrong, his world might collapse, he might have to digress, or he might have to make an exception to his current paradigm. Anton. Okay. So, I want to go over the video clips again, once again, but first I'm gonna restate the argument from the beginning. The suspicion was that by being, in the school of communications, that communications necessarily, the root commune, there's an interiority and an exteriority, and so the claims, the ubiquitous and universal claims of language that Corey was going on about when he would use terms like we and we humans, and this is how humans are, and humans are capable of this and that, and all just all of the universal claims that he's trying to pass off as truth, which actually boil down to more like truth upon agreement, not truth in any sort of platonic way, I suppose. Anyway, so the thing is I say there's an exception to the rule. If there's an interior to this, then there's an exception to the rule. Sure enough, Daniel Everett finds it, as Reinach writes about it. I make an argument for it, against Anton's claims, and so I would really appreciate, instead of an underhanded concession, maybe an overhanded concession, maybe a you've made a good point, but he's going to continue to fight, and I think it's because he is incapable of actually thinking about the ramifications of what it means to bump into another human culture, not a Neanderthal culture, because we can take one of their children out and raise it and it'll learn our ways and vice versa. So not a Neanderthal culture, but another culture that simply doesn't have these aspects of language and math and so forth. So hopefully the argument is clear to whoever's listening that I'm arguing that there's an exception and that these universal claims are not correct where he brings those in. So let's just listen again on Rambling Digressions on Humanity, some parts for Das Pook at 7:24. And keep in mind he's going to start with the word degenerate here, which I'll hopefully link back into.
Plato. If you look at those works, I think he's going to say, no, there's a kind of evolution and development of oral noetics, and you can't really get at this thing called the pure oral state. Now, this is where I think Despook's having this odd kind of haggle. He's going, hey, look, no, you're only talking about recursive languages, and I mean non-recursive. There's these other kinds of languages that you're now telling us about.
Yeah.
See, that's the problem. Language is historical. You seem to be, from my perspective, okay, from my read of it, you're essentializing. Not only are you wanting to get at this thing called the essential human in trying to deny it. I don't think I've ever offered a coherent position on all of this. I think I've given a bunch of ideas.
That's right.
I think I've tried to oftentimes give in response videos to what other people were saying. I didn't sit down and go, here's my philosophy.
Maybe you should.
Now, did I try to lay out some facts as I saw them? Yes. And was I trying to talk about humanity
now he's going to tell us
yes.
the facts.
I think you're going to have this.
What did he say? I'm going to talk about humanity broadly. That's my whole argument. That he thinks he's got the gist of that. So he continues.
Issue of where a difference of degree becomes a difference of kind. Now, I probably would say image making, the ability to recognize the eidetic image. This is part of what we mean by human. Language is part of what we mean by human. And then you didn't like the math.
Yeah, I
I think the math example is interesting, but now here's what the questions you want to raise. Okay, so there are these people. First, does the math apply to them and still work in their world, even though they're unable to learn it? By your logic, they're unable. That'll be the first question. Second question is, aren't all people, to the extent that they speak, partly able to learn math as that what we mean? Now, some of this gets difficult. What we mean by human is tricky. I think we probably all saw this, that, 1 to 4%, I think upwards of 4% of Europeans have Neanderthal.
Okay, so these people aren't Neanderthal. I would like a statement of your position on things instead of just quoting and name dropping and thinking that you're dropping facts and then making these backwards concessions. Anyway, okay, so he continues on, and what was I going to get at there? That he thinks he's laying down facts about language, and do they have this math? And well, there was another point that he brought up that I was going to bring. Damn. Anyway, and so the point is okay. So then we have our haggle. Then we have our arguments, and we state the evidence, and then so finally here's the underhanded response once again. In the next video, where he concedes. Essentially, this is conceding, as far as I can tell, because now he's going to realize that the limit of his discussion is actually it's Occidental and it's modern, and that there is an exception. But do I get credit for it? Well, let's see.
Degenerate ways in which people think they're going to be happy by being provided for. That's the problem. And my hope is that one day people will wake up and they will see. And when I say people, this is a little shout out here to Despoof, who seems unable to understand. When I say people, and I'm talking about humans, for the most part, we're talking in very broad strokes, and we mean those people who are here, modern Westerners who are watching, who are likely to hear this video, who are watching YouTube, who are...
Listen to all the qualifiers. Listen to him say it. Okay, so finally he's realized, no, we're talking about, we're talking about Western humans. We're talking about people that are likely to see this video, right? And so he's backstepped a little bit, right? And he's he phrased it in terms of a shout out, so that was nice, but then it was underhanded. So he sends me a question like, what do I want from him? Not in general. And I guess what I want is I want him to maybe start talking without qualifying. Or I mean, is that his big trick? Is that the whole trick, is to not land on it? Is that how he ekes out and tries to convince and convert people to his vantage point, his viewpoint? I mean, and then to speak of that which is degenerate, I mean, my point, how I was inspired by Derrida, was the idea you can't have a host if you don't have a parasite. They're hand in hand, and so if you deconstruct it, is having a host a type of parasitism, or is having a parasite a type of hostism, if you will? And maybe that's a whole different question. But okay, so anyway, I'm getting all over the map here. Maybe I should re-record this. So I shut down my videos, thinking, okay, I got that, and I feel fine about it. And then I post another. Then I post Daniel Everett speaking, and he gets on and he makes his comments, and that's how I ended the last video, was his comments on it. And so what ends up happening is okay, so now he's conceded that there are this exceptional type of human, and I did make a metaphor saying these are a different type of human, a different in kind, like Westerners who write, they're like football players, and the overhand pass is the metaphor or the analogy to being able to write. And so the American Indians would be like rugby players. They have everything except for the underhand pass or the overhand pass because they're not writing. And so those are very similar to each other. Rugby and football are a difference of degree, but the Piraha are a difference in kind, in that they don't have the math and they don't have the history. They don't have all those other things that I went over in those previous videos. Okay, and so he concedes. Anton concedes in this very underhanded way, and then I post the video, and so he then brings up my question. My video, the very title is a question: what are the implications and ramifications of identifying with the Piraha? And so his answer once again is kind of, you know, kind of a concession, where he says cultural variety itself seems to surpass dominant accounts of what is routinely meant by the human. Still, and then he instead of answering what are the ramifications and the implications, he says what is the advantage and disadvantage of identifying with these particular humans rather than with other animals, dogs, cats, pigs, aspects of the natural world? And my response is, because he didn't answer my question, was to not answer his question. So my whole point in that is that I respond to this, and you can read this, is notice how the question about ramification and implication is met with a revised question about advantage and disadvantage, which basically turns my curiosity. I'm now my question about ramification, the ramifications of knowing that there's an exception to the modern ubiquitous claims about language. Corey turns the question into something about advantage and disadvantage, which I see as an implementing. He's trying to eke in, once again, a hierarchical reapproach to that question by putting it advantage, disadvantage, where I'm just saying, okay, look, here's this culture. We can talk to them. We can interact with them. Maybe their adults are like our preschool children. But what now are the ramifications of that? What are the implications of that? And to me, it's a question of the host and the parasite, of good and bad, evil. Is evil a type of good, or is good a type of evil? And this might suggest, in terms of like recapitalization, in terms of biology, how we go through a embryonic state, and we go through a fish state where we have gills, and then we look kind of like pigs, and then finally we're human, where you cover through your development all of the historic natures of your language. And so here we have an example of people that their language does not have these aspects. And so that's the exception to the communal rule. Anyway, I guess I'm just really, really, really trying to hammer this home, because I thought that, and so Anton's response, to my saying, look, you're doing it again. You're trying to implement the hierarchical perspective, from where it came, which is from the recursive language, which I guess, that's the realm that we're within. But the whole point is that I'm not asking that. I'm asking, what are the implications, if somebody has an idea for it. Okay, so and his response is, I literally have no idea what you're talking about. I re-explain it. I have another response. I'm not certain how to get it across, because to me it runs into a certain enigma, and I'm wanting people to deal with this enigma. Anyway, so that's the point. I think I am done. I think that people can see that the haggle went in my favor, and I think that people would like to get solid statements instead of qualified statements from Anton, and maybe actually we'll find out who he is, instead of just how the practice of being and protecting his authorial position as a professor is maintained when he's thrown out to the wolves of YouTube. that I guess he's tries to put so many in. So please comment on this. Yeah, thanks.